Do you want an amazing marriage? Are you ready to take your marriage to the next level? Then stick around for Your Marriage Matters podcast with marriage coach Lynn. Let's put some fun and sizzle into your relationship.
Hi, are you having a great week? Are you having a great marriage? Today's episode might stir the pot a little. We are going to go places you might not like, but if you want to build a strong, solid marriage that will take you the distance, today's show is very important. Don't be bashful and let's dig in. This is the first episode on the Your Marriage Matters podcast that will stand alone. For the next several weeks, we will have different topics and then offer another series. I'm thinking of focusing on husbands and fathers and having my husband Bob join me to co-host. In fact, he will join me next week as we answer the question, is marriage hard work? Today's show is titled, Let's Be Honest. Having insight and awareness about yourself is what we want to explore. We know honesty is important for growth and self-improvement, but it can be risky to face what we've been avoiding. It's uncomfortable to take a look at our faults and emotional pain, isn't it? Let's talk about why we should face the truth about ourselves, what benefit it brings to a marriage relationship. Let's talk about how facing our hardships and pain can ultimately bring us to freedom and why it's liberating to face the pain. Would you agree that we all have some sort of pain, whether the result of childhood or the result of inner dialogue in our minds? Perhaps we sabotage ourselves in some areas of life. Perhaps we have lingering regret. Maybe we have some habits we don't like and are trying to overcome. In any event, we want to set aside our weaknesses or wish we didn't have to deal with them. Does any of this sound familiar? Why should we dig up what we've been hiding? So that we can mature, heal our brokenness, or heal some part of our brokenness. We can then interact in our relationship in a more mature and rewarding ways. I have seen that insight and wisdom in a marriage relationship begets more insight and meaning in a relationship. You lift your partner up to higher levels and vice versa. Keep your stuff hidden under the rug and it becomes putrid, stagnant, and things can deteriorate. Hide your stuff it down, avoid it, and the result might be addictions. Alcohol, gambling, sabotaging yourself. Anger, denial, angst, they're all common expressions by someone who doesn't want to deal honestly with their brokenness. Thus, a couple suffers from a low level of communication if there is continuous anger, angst, denial, and avoidance. For example, maybe you feel you aren't good enough and you go from job to job reminding yourself that you aren't worthy or good enough. If we hide and hide and hide, we will run and run and run. Meanwhile, you might never get close enough to your partner, and your partner won't fully understand why your marriage lacks the closeness. In essence, it's unfair to your marriage if you are hiding or avoiding something that needs to be dealt with. Have you had to live with a spouse who bursts out in anger several times a day? He says it's you, but it's really not. Do you have a spouse who shuts down and won't talk about things? Chances are there's something they don't want to deal with within themselves, not you. Has your sex life changed dramatically since you got married to the point where you wonder how you got there? Someone's not dealing with something. If we don't dig it up, root it out, and honestly face what we are burying, we introduce great risk to our marriage. Tremendous risk. Do you know anyone on the brink of divorce? I can guarantee that there are some issues each partner is not dealing with. I would bet money on this. Some people would rather get divorced than dig and dig and dig out some darkness about themselves. They will never admit it though. They continue to protect and keep buried something they prefer to avoid. Here are a few questions for you to ponder when you think about the hardships, challenges, or frustrations you are facing right now. 1. Are you being honest with yourself? Example: my spouse doesn't speak to me that much, doesn't share her thoughts or feelings. What's wrong with her? I don't know what to do, and I can't figure it out. I try asking her what her problem is. Maybe she's depressed. I can't take it anymore. That's a logical line of thought, isn't it? But now we need to shift it to ourselves and ask, am I creating an environment where my spouse feels safe enough to talk with me? Is my spouse in some type of depression, anxiety, or state of being overwhelmed? And if so, how can I ask non-threatening questions to see what is going on inside her mind? What is the mental dialogue going on inside her head? And let's see if I can join her in her thoughts. Does she feel like she can trust me? Do I care? Do I truly care? Or does she think I am just trying to enter her world in order to get what I want? Am I treading gently and carefully, or am I being domineering and intrusive? Please listen to the Love Map episode 2 if you haven't already. Basically, you want to give your spouse an invitation that you want to join her world, his world, their pain, whatever it is, their world. You want an invitation, and you want to offer yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, husbands and wives, we guard very tightly and dearly our pain. We might be keeping this from our spouse, even in the best of marriages. There's a lot to risk when we open up and share. Intentional vulnerability is not something most people welcome. We don't want to face pain, and we certainly don't want to open up our wounds and examine them. We would like it to go away. Poof, go away. Question number 1 was, are you being honest with yourself? Please ask that frequently and daily. Ask it before you speak. Question number 2 is, are you facing your pain? What if you feel lonely in your marriage? What if you feel you've drifted in ways that don't alarm you, but that form anxiety? You can't pinpoint it, and you don't really want to bring it up to your spouse. By the way, I'm in favor of sharing and talking with your spouse about everything and anything. However, there are times when you don't want to burden your spouse, and times where you need to sort things out for yourself first. Times where you need to edit your comments when you do speak. Remember the think before you speak model? Before you speak, go through the think checklist, THINK. Is it T, true, H, helpful, I, inspiring, N, necessary, K, kind? Think before you speak. You don't want to overload your spouse. You don't want to speak unkindly, and you don't want to speak, well, you do want to speak truthfully. Your marriage might not be what it used to be. We will have times where things seem to flow effortlessly in our marriage, and other times where we face loneliness, disillusionment, sadness, disappointment. We have to face our pain, get to the source, and hopefully decide to sit with that pain, learn from it, and find ways to cope. Question number 3 in this process that I would like to throw out to you is, are you expressing your vulnerability? Right? How unfair is it to our spouse when we don't express ourselves and we expect them to be mind readers or to understand us? So how are you expressing your vulnerability? In order to be able to express your vulnerability, you have to feel trust in a relationship. It requires respect and safety. How many partners feel like they can't express themselves for fear of not being taken seriously, or being criticized, or cut down, or ignored? When you are on the receiving end of your partner expressing vulnerable, highly personable disclosures, please remember to take those feelings and thoughts seriously. It's hard enough to face our own weaknesses, embarrassments, difficult feelings about ourselves. And you know it's even harder to share those with others, right? What happens is that we feel exposed. For example, let's say you've been married 4 years and you say to your husband, I think I'd like to have a baby. And he says, what? I thought we agreed no kids until 10 years into our marriage. We want to travel and build our careers. Well, that's a sting, a big sting. So we want to avoid quick, terse responses during vulnerability. Why? Because it causes a shutdown and future timidness. And the result, we might not want to discuss the topic. We might begin to live in fear of bringing up the same topic later on because we felt we've been snapped at. We've had a sting in the response from our partner. Maybe it's true that you had an agreement early on in your marriage, but things are subject to change. Topics can be brought up and revisited. When that happens, be sure to listen quietly to your spouse and respond in ways that are not threatening or stinging. So let's recap. Here are a few questions for you to ponder when you think about hardships, challenges, or frustrations you are facing right now. 1, are you being honest with yourself? In other words, are you acknowledging it? 2, are you facing your pain? In other words, are you finding ways to deal with it? This is a more active question and response that warrants an active response, and it's distinct from the first question. So number 1 is, are you being honest with yourself? You're just acknowledging and facing that and having awareness. And number 2, are you actually facing your pain? Are you doing something about it? What are you doing about it? Are you coping? How are you coping? And the third question is, are you expressing your vulnerability? This is what requires a safe space within your marriage. So how do we create a safe space? Well, if you've listened to the first 11 episodes of this podcast, you know the answers and how to go about it. Right? The Sound Relationship House was a great model. We want fondness and admiration, dialoguing with your partner, managing conflict and problems, having a positive perspective, etc. All those things. You must do things that build trust, comfort, and intimacy, and then you will have a safe space in which to express your vulnerability. As we wind down today's podcast, I want to conclude with, why is honesty so important? Because without it, you aren't likely to build a highly functioning team of 2. There will be things you withhold, things you avoid. Your partner won't fully understand you. So much about marriage is understanding each other. I see it over and over. Couples don't really understand each other. They withhold, they avoid. Well, you're not going to get to a higher level of intimacy if you're doing these things. So you have to, it's an ongoing process here to create intimate, safe, trustworthy, respectful relationship. And there's give and take. You might have ebbs and flows as you work on building. Your partner doesn't know what to do to please you or to help you, or to walk through life with you in ways in which you might need or appreciate if you're withholding and avoiding and escaping and running away. This week, I would like to ask you to determine if you are creating a safe space 100% of the time for your partner to express himself freely and openly. Don't belittle, ridicule, or be hurried. Avoid distractions when your partner is speaking to you. Don't get distracted. And the things that you can do allow time to listen, do make eye contact, do offer genuine and loving support. Until next week, make your marriage great.